estimated that 60% of sex workers in South Africa are HIV positive. The statistics were announced by the South African National AIDS Council, SANAC, at the launch of a national HIV/AIDS program for sex workers here in Johannesburg. The program aims to roll out South Africa's first ever HIV care and treatment plan for sex workers. Sex work is still illegal here in South Africa. The comments made by the Justice Deputy Minister, Jeffery, says sex work is having a negative impact on the country. Judging by his statement, it's clear that we will not see the decriminalization in this lifetime, it seems. Now, the question is, will this program yield results, or decriminalization is the only way to go and try and put an end to these issues and other issues facing sex workers? Now, to help us unpack this emotive issue, we are joined from Sex Workers Education and the Advocacy Task Force SWET. That's Dianne Massawe, who's with me in studio this morning. A very good morning to you. And then from our Cape Town studios, we are joined by Nozizwe Madlala-Routledge, who is Embrace Dignity's Executive Director. A very good morning to you as well, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you, Eben. And good morning to you, Nozizwe.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Dianne.
Let's start with the comments, Dianne, of the Deputy Minister, Jeffery, about sex work being a negative and having a negative impact on society. How do you view that?
I mean, I was at that meeting with the Deputy Minister, and I think his statement or his comment was taken out of context. What he was referring to, some of the things that the ministry and the government will have to consider when we begin this law reform commission process, and when the government actually has to consider what laws that the government should take for the country. So these are one of the things that they have to look at. In terms of whether it's going to negatively impact the country, I think that is for us to still have further communications and conversations around, because as an organization, we really don't think that decrim of sex work will negatively impact the country. But what we do know is the criminalization of sex work currently negatively impacts sex workers and their clients.
Nozizwe, if I can come to you in Cape Town, it's the oldest profession. It's accepted. It's always been done. It's legal elsewhere in the world with some results. Why would you put decriminalization as a negative and out of the question here in South Africa?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you and SABC for bringing us together in this very important debate. And I want to appeal to South Africans that it is about time that we resolve this issue. We have been debating it since the dawn of our democracy. And in the meantime, very many young girls and young women are having their lives wrecked. They are experiencing abuse at the hands of men. And we really think that it is time for South Africa to do the right thing. Now, in relation to your question, I want to agree with the Deputy Minister of Justice to say prostitution has a negative impact on society. And I would agree also that we do need to study it very deeply in order to understand its full impact on the individuals concerned and society. Third, I want to say that as Embrace Dignity, we do not support total decriminalization. We also know that the present situation in South Africa, where we have total criminalization, doesn't work. So the debate really is between, as you can hear, between whether we should totally decriminalize prostitution or whether we should decriminalize the sex workers. Embrace Dignity supports the idea that those in prostitution needs to be decriminalized in order for them to be better protected by the law, for them to access health care, and for them to be able to exit. But the industry itself, there's no basis for it to be decriminalized. Those who buy sex do not have a right to do so. Those who pimp women and those who benefit, who profit from the exploitation, don't have the right to do so, and we say they should remain criminalized. So we're pushing for partial decriminalization, which we think, in fact, you say that the rest of the world has legalized prostitution. This is not the case. In fact, a number of countries...
49 countries have legalized it.
Okay, yes, 49 out of how many countries? If you look at the United Nations...
Out of around 200.
We have very many countries in the world. And in fact, those that have legalized, look at the Netherlands. They legalized prostitution in 2000. They are reconsidering that. Germany is reconsidering, and here's the issue, here's the thing. They've not been able to better protect the women by legalizing or decriminalizing prostitution. Instead, they've seen a growth in human trafficking because, of course, it just makes sense. Where there's demand, there'll be supply. So they've seen a growth in human trafficking. Women have been killed. It just hasn't protected them better. There's
everywhere, Nozizwe, where there's a blanket ban, and that's where I think Dianne can come in and talk about. Everywhere where there's a blanket ban, there's always an undercurrent and an underbelly that develops, and that might even be worse in this case. But Dianne, how do you view this?
I mean, it is true. I think when we have total criminalization, that doesn't work. And I think people who support the notion of total criminalization have the notion that if the industry is criminalized, the industry is going to go away. In South Africa, we've had total criminalization since 2007, and the industry hasn't gone away. I mean, and yes, you know, Nozizwe is speaking about partial criminalization or partial decrim, where the sex worker is allowed to work, but her client is criminalized, the industry is criminalized. And a country that comes to mind is Sweden. And working with sex workers in Sweden and organizations who work with sex workers in Sweden, we know that this model is also not working in Sweden. Because what then happens is for sex workers who want to do sex work and who want to protect their clients, they then go underground and they actually then expose themselves to higher risks of violence at the hands of clients, police, but also other criminal elements that want to abuse them. And even when we speak about the Netherlands, you know, yes, you know, in the Netherlands, once again, it's a legalized model where sex workers are allowed to work if they are allowed to work in a certain area. And once again, this also doesn't work because it means if sex workers choose to work outside that area, they're committing a crime. So I think for South Africa, and yes, I think we can learn from other countries, and we need to find a model that works in this country, looking at our conditions in this country. We need to find a model where the industry is allowed to work, where we have special laws to protect people, you know, from people who are doing sex work, to also provide people who want to leave with options. You know, when we talk about criminalizing the client and saying the client doesn't have to buy, the reality is the client has the option to buy. And a lot of times the client is an adult who is going to buy services. So why should we criminalize that?
Yes. Absolutely. You've got the final remarks this morning, Nozizwe. Tell us how you view that and what model would you like to see put in place?
Well, I don't have the final word. I think South Africa will have the final word. That's why I really welcome the idea or the announcement from government that they are going to open this debate to the public. I would like to hear the views of the different sectors of our society talking about this. But let me just end by saying we've asked Parliament in December, at the end of the 16 days of no violence against women and children, we marched to Parliament and we asked the Speaker of Parliament and the Chair of the National Council of Provinces to do a thorough investigation in South Africa, because we have twin problems. We have very high levels of violence against women, and that, Dianne, I'm sure you agree with us. There's a very strong connection between sexual abuse and sexual exploitation. So we need this to be understood and studied. We also have very high levels of unemployment, which drive a lot of prostitution, a large number of the women, and we work with them directly. 89% of them want to leave prostitution because this is not their choice. This is not their first choice. But poverty is driving prostitution. So we want Parliament to investigate this matter, to understand what is driving prostitution, what can we do about it? And we're not calling for, as you say, a total ban. We are saying those in prostitution need to be decriminalized. But others who have power need to remain criminalized, like the men who buy women. They have no right to do that.
There will always be a market for this, unfortunately, and I speak for men out there who might have a different perspective. But thank you for joining us today, Nozizwe Madlala-Routledge, who is with Embrace Dignity, the Executive Director, and then Dianne Massawe from Sweat here in Johannesburg. Thank you for joining us. It's a discussion that we will continue to have throughout the year, Dianne, as we continue to have both public forum where we talk about sex work in South Africa. It's not something that'll go away. There's no doubt about it. We can't wish it away, and we simply can't make laws that will make it go away. It's not going to happen. Thank you, though, for joining us.
Thank you, Eben.
Dianne will be back throughout the rest of the year to talk about these as we continue discussions around sex work in South Africa. What do you think? At SABC Newsroom, that's